Although it's always my hope that one of my videos may one day provide someone with an idea on how to deal with something in their lives, or show someone that they're not the only person noticing the things going on around us, and at the very least feel some kind of camaraderie. The main purpose of this channel is primarily for me. This is my venting space, where I talk about whatever's on my mind, and this video is very much the apex of that. And I'm going to be talking today about something I've always wanted to talk about, but recent events in my life have given me an example I can actually refer to that's quite solid. So when it comes to personal beliefs and faith, I'm open-minded and tolerant as long as those beliefs don't impact others around the person negatively. And I extend this to all belief systems, from religion right the way over to horoscopes and birthstones. But when it comes to my own beliefs, in things such as deities or the afterlife, you could say I'm agnostic. Now, my hope is actually that when we die, we do just go into nothingness, which sounds very dark, but let me put it this way. Obviously, the idea of hell scares me, but the idea of heaven raises questions in me. Sure, I'd rather go to heaven than hell, but what if I get there and someone I loved didn't, because they crossed one too many lines? The thought of one day being nothing is weirdly comforting, to me anyway, even if it's purely by comparison to the alternatives. But when it comes to a belief in a higher power, I'm unsure, and I'm going to give you an example as to why. So this January just gone, my cousin arranged a get-together for the family in Newcastle, partly as a second Christmas, but primarily because my aunt living up there was quite unwell, and this could really be one last goodbye. We all went, about 30 plus of us, and stayed in these cottages, with my cousin having the main cottage that served as the main meeting point. I went along and I was introduced to some new people, as well as some technically new people, because some of my relatives were kids when I last saw them. I'd been out of touch for a very long time. And I met my aunt again for the first time in 8 years, since her own mum's funeral actually. She looked unwell, but not horrifically so. I figured she may have some months left, because I'd seen older relatives in much worse conditions. So on the first night I got drunk with my second cousin. He's his mum's my cousin, but I'm closer to him in age, and I don't make a habit of getting drunk anymore, so I probably didn't drink that much, but I'm a bit of a lightweight now. The second night everybody else got drunk, and although I was on the soft drinks now, it was an enjoyable party, and it was a good feeling. So we had this very, very noisy party, and very boozy for most people. Family pictures came out, photo albums. But around midnight we went back to our individual cottages. I stayed up for a little while in mine, and then I went to bed at around 3 o'clock. But as I was dozing off, there was a banging on the door. Now I figured it was the younger cousins who got drunk messing about. Knocking on people's doors and running away. Knockdown ginger, we used to call it over here. But it was actually my cousin's wife, the one that had organised the get-together. And in the distance behind her was an ambulance. My aunt had deteriorated, and the ambulance crew basically could do nothing for her. So my mum and sister went straight out. I went to get a coat to join them. As I came out, I saw my aunt, what I thought was unconscious, in the ambulance, but the tears from the few assembled around told me that she'd gone. I'd gotten so used to seeing family members in worse states that I never figured it would have happened anytime soon, but it had happened this very morning. So all that was left to do was to assemble the rest of the family. There was one point where I had to let myself into a cottage to wake up the two drunken cousins, but even as I approached the bedroom door, I prayed to myself that I'd got the right cottage. Thankfully I had, but I felt sorry for the guys being woken up with banging heads to the sight of me and their two sisters at the end of the bed. My aunt would have probably found that funny, actually. They got up quite quickly though, so they're obviously better at dealing with hangovers than I am. But we assembled in the main cottage, and it was so hard to believe that this was the venue of a party just a few hours ago. Now we were in mourning. But it was, it was a very peaceful, it was what they would call a warm down. Now I like to keep really personal stuff off this channel, but I wanted to share this story for a reason. And that reason is that although this was the worst thing that could have happened, and I wish my aunt had gotten better and lived to the age that her mum had lived to. Her mum was 91, she was only 75. It was her birthday these past few days. But I can't help but shake off this feeling that the worst thing happened, but in the right way. First of all, everybody was there. Nobody bailed, no one made any excuses to not show up. I'd stayed away for so long, but even I made it up there. And my aunt got a proper reunion, even if her grandson and I were drunken fools on the first night and everyone else was on the second night. And everyone played a part. So my cousin and my sister had their partners all with them, and they all helped and supported them, and also the rest of the family. So one partner cooked for us the next day. Another was a really friendly ear. He actually came over and spoke to me on a walk that me and about 5 of the lads went on the next day in the sort of afternoon time. In fact, I get the feeling that my cousin's new wife, who I met for the first time, and is a lovely woman, had helped organise the whole gathering in a very big way. And my sister's partner, a funeral director, organised the funeral from the other end of the country, where we live. Everyone had a role, and even little things like the fact that the family picture we took beforehand was one of the nicest pictures I've ever seen in my life. Just little things like that, but mainly we were all there for each other, and we were together. We were united. And the aftermath seemed right too. Upon our return, a friend of my mum's showed up, and she had framed the family picture as a gift, and it now sits on our mantelpiece. And a few other family friends and other members of the family have been very, very kind, which showed me that for all the dislike I had of this area when I first moved here, this is actually quite a good place to be. And the funeral itself a month later was elegant without becoming a spectacle. And the weather was sunny despite it being the north of England in February, late February. But my point is that the worst happened, but in the best possible way. The way that I would like to go someday, with dignity and class, not just for my aunt, but for all of us. At the funeral, some suggested that my aunt may have known she was going, and one quote I heard which I liked was that she effectively attended her own wake, which I thought it sounds classy to me. But for me, I wonder if there was something looking after my aunt and all of us. A god maybe, the stars perhaps, I don't know. But it felt more than a coincidence for me, which is why I'm probably more of an agnostic than an atheist. And this isn't the only time I've ever felt this way. I'll always remember a time when I was going through a really difficult time, and I just so happened to bump into this guy that I'd known years ago in our social groups, and one of the loveliest guys on the planet, but he left the group very suddenly. We all thought that he'd cut us out, he didn't like us, but I met him and he was the positive guy that he'd always been, very friendly, and I needed to see a friendly face that day. And there was another time I was walking through Chichester Woods with my friend, and he was worried about a mental health assessment that he had at some point. And he had anxiety, so he kept talking about it, and I was trying to reassure him. And we sat down on a bench somewhere. And then these two guys just randomly sat down next to us, maybe a few years older than us, possibly the same age. Offered us a beer, I think it was Budweiser, and a cigarette. And one of them just turned and said, "Do you gentlemen have any, experiences with the mental health services?" And me and my mate just thought, oh my God, this is quite, this is quite appropriate. This is quite relevant to what we were talking about. Little moments like that make me wonder if someone or something has been sent to me or to someone that I know. And there's probably many other examples of this where I just haven't thought about it in those terms, where the right person came along or the right thing happened, or maybe the right thing for the bad reasons, or maybe I was sent to someone purely to help them or to be an example of what not to be. You never know. Now, I do get critical of religion sometimes. I don't like religious hypocrites. I don't like certain religions getting priority over others. And in particular, I dislike those random people you get in comment sections of every video and article these days boasting about how everybody else is going to hell except them. These people seem to be everywhere, no matter what the topic is. And they are braggers. The sort of people that would tell a crying child that their deceased rabbit is burning. I hate people like that. You know, I can't imagine a situation where you go up to heaven and you meet your creator and your first instinct is, yeah, okay, thank you for welcoming me up here. But before we go any further, that guy I was arguing with on Twitter earlier, has he made it up here as well? No, he's down in hell. Yes! I'm sorry, but that's, you know, a loving God wouldn't appreciate that. Or at least I don't think they would. But you will never catch me being critical of people of genuine faith because of my own experiences. In fact, I enjoy listening to people of religious faiths talk about the goodness they feel because of their faith. Even if there is a logical alternative explanation for their experience, I still appreciate the joy they show. And I very much respect their determined commitment to their faith. You know, to be that dedicated. I think the world would be a bleaker place without religion in it, by and large. I'll give you one last example, actually, of when I first started to feel this way about religious people. So this is going back to sort of early-ish YouTube, the whole Christians versus atheists movement thing. And like most things online, it eventually devolved into people just making response videos and mocking, but still calling it a debate. And there was a video from a guy I remember who he'd lost his daughter 15 years ago. She died in infancy. But he still would see in his sleep visions of a 6-year-old child, which he believed was his daughter. You know, his daughter coming to visit him. And someone did a response video pointing out, like, look, you know, it's probably something else. It's probably some other child that you've seen. You know, I don't think the human mind can dream up faces. I think if you dream about a person in your sleep, even if it's a face you don't recognise, it's probably one you've seen in passing. And this responder also pointed out that you say your kid died in infancy 15 years ago, then why is it a 6-year-old child? Why is it not either a 15-year-old or a little baby? Little things like that. And the thing is that they were probably right. It probably wasn't a visiting spirit. Probably wasn't that child. That child is probably gone. But just let people have their faith. Just let people have the things that make them feel comfortable. You know, even if it doesn't make sense to us. That's the great thing about personal belief and personal faith, is it doesn't have to make sense to other people. It only has to make sense to you. And as long as you're not interfering in other people's lives with those beliefs, I'm more than happy to just not say anything and just be tolerant and understanding. And yeah, there's probably a big it was probably all coincidence what happened in Newcastle the other month. Or those two guys that came and sat next to me and my friend, or that other guy just randomly showing up. It's probably bound to all happen. But sometimes I do wonder when things like that, you know, is there something looking after me? And I will admit there are times where I do find myself in my head talking to something. You know, you could say manifestation. You could say that's what I'm doing. Or you could say I'm praying. But I'm not harming anyone. So I'm not anti-religion. I'm not against religious people. It's just the bad side. But that's more or less my approach to anything anyway.